Hello, everyone. Welcome to Grid Live Wrap Up. We got Isha Azim from Racing with Isha, Alex Anderson from the Gay Racing Podcast, Kobe Lambert from the Podium Finish from NASCAR.info on Ben Schneider's YouTube, Ben Schneider himself, and I'm Joe Samdiego. Thank you so much for tuning in. A big thank you to our Patreon investors. Calling the show, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew, the newest one. You too can invest in the Grid Network. Link in the video descriptions, and you could get yourself a Grid Network sticker as well too. We'll mail several of them to any of our new investors, and you can also invest through Buy Me a Coffee, Super Chat, or if you're not watching us live, the YouTube thanks button. And if you want to give a cup of coffee or some funds to a particular member of the Grid Network team, just mention it in the comment, and we'll forward it to them, and they'll thank you on the air. One of the big things, Ben, it was a big weekend here in the United States with NASCAR Cup Series at Homestead, Miami, but we'll start over in the Lone Star State, Formula One in Texas, and still waiting to see if there's going to be any update on the results.
Yeah, Joe, we'll get to that in a moment, but first let's talk about the race winner. A huge shocker here with Max Verstappen taking his 50th career win in Formula One. This puts him one win away from tying three-time world champion Alain Prost, as well as clinching, four-time champion Alain Prost, forgive me there, as well as clinching the grid ranking world championship. Verstappen came back from sixth place, had brake issues, but appeared to outsmart the competition with strategy. It looked like a one-stop might work for Lando Norris and Lewis Hamilton, and that Verstappen on medium tires was going to be in trouble, but that ultimately did not happen. So, Isha, we'll start with you. Do you believe there was a chance that Lewis or Lando would have taken the win ahead of Verstappen, or was this just destined to be, as we've seen so many times this year, another Max Verstappen and Red Bull Racing victory?
Ben, at a few moments throughout the race, I did think that there was a chance Lewis or Lando could have taken the race. One of those moments was on the first turn of that first lap, when Lando took the lead from Charles Leclerc at that moment, and then the next few laps where he held on to the lead, I thought that maybe he'd be able to take it. But then, as it always happens in all of the races we've seen, the majority of them so far, Max Verstappen came back up to the front. And then there were also moments where Hamilton was in the lead, and I was thinking that, maybe he'll be able to do it as well. But it was just the usual scenario we always see of Max Verstappen making it seem like somebody else might have a chance, but then coming back to take the lead.
Yeah, I really felt it was a day where it was destined to be another Max Verstappen victory. One way or another, Max Verstappen was going to find a way to win this race. Instead of starting 6th, he should have started 20th, and we might be talking about something completely different right now. But, still got to give the shout out to Red Bull and the amazing car they built this year. It shows this car is nearly unbeatable. And in order for someone else to get a win, it really seems like Max Verstappen is going to have to need some type of mechanical failure that'll retire him from the race or contact on the track, because today that Red Bull's on rails again, but at least it wasn't a blowout victory like we've seen many times this season with Max Verstappen and Red Bull. Yeah, but looking at Lewis and Lando, I think they had some really great races. They did the best that they could have possibly done in this situation, given the circumstances. But, Verstappen, Red Bull, they just keep on dominating.
Yeah, we'll see. Maybe it's a good thing Lewis Hamilton didn't end up getting the win. Let's talk about what's going on with both him and Charles Leclerc right now. The results are still unofficial. We are waiting for an update regarding some technical infractions that they may be going through right now. The FIA technical delegate Joe Bauer revealed that the floor wear on both Hamilton's Mercedes and Leclerc's Ferrari were found to not be in compliance with F1's technical regulations. This could result in both of them being disqualified from the race, which would move Lando Norris, Carlos Sainz, and Sergio Perez up to second, third, and fourth, respectively. Also, George Russell from 7th to 5th, since he would pick up 2 spots as Leclerc finished in 6th on the track, and everybody behind as well, including potentially the young American Logan Sargent picking up a point in P10 in his home Grand Prix. What a story that would be post-race if that does happen. But Kobe, we'll go to you here on this one first. How big of a setback would this be for both these drivers, especially Hamilton trying to catch up to Sergio Perez for second in the driver's standings?
I think it'll be a blow to the morale of Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes. Lewis Hamilton had a really great race today, and on the podium after the race, you could tell how excited he was to bring home a good result for the team as they continue to try to salvage what they can out of this season. As we already know, Lewis Hamilton loves the United States. He loves whenever they're racing over here, and if there's like certain races any various points on the calendar, this is one of the races where he wants to perform well because he does have a huge fan base here in the United States. And for Charles Leclerc, starting up front, not the day he was on, and he was very frustrated on the radio today because he felt like that Ferrari should have performed a lot better, and they didn't really get the result that they wanted. He's really not going to have the result that he wanted if he's were to get disqualified after the race. So we're definitely going to be paying attention to that, and maybe before we go off the air tonight, we'll finally have an answer from the race stewards.
Yeah, I agree with Kobe. I don't really have much to add to that, but I think that this was definitely a bigger setback for Lewis Hamilton than for Charles Leclerc. Obviously, because Ben, as you mentioned, Hamilton's trying to catch up to Sergio Perez in the standings. As far as Hamilton goes, I think that we have, I think, 4 races left in the season. I think that he's still gonna be able to, pick up on the points and maybe get to that spot of Sergio Perez, that he's in right now. But I think that when we look at Charles Leclerc, I think that this was a bit of a setback for him, if this, ends up going through, but I don't think it's as big as it was for Lewis Hamilton because Charles Leclerc has had a mixed season so far, right? Hamilton and the Mercedes are trying to improve and, as Kobe mentioned, salvage what they can. So I think that this was definitely worse for Lewis Hamilton, and I just hope that this doesn't end up going through because that would mix up many of the results.
Yeah, it would certainly cause a major rewrite, just like we've seen NASCAR the last couple of weeks here with these disqualifications we've been dealing with. So we'll continue to monitor that, and if we get an update before we go off the air, of course, we will bring that to you. Now, let's talk about Lando Norris and McLaren a little bit. Norris had a great start to the race, looked to be doing everything right, leading essentially the first half of it. The McLaren team responded well when Max Verstappen made his first pit stop. Even after the pass for the lead, Verstappen was really unable to pull away on the medium tires. Many thought the McLaren was on the one stop, and Norris eventually pitted, and then Verstappen came out ahead ultimately at the end of it all. So, Isha, did you sense that Red Bull were not showing their full hand today, and did they mislead the other teams into thinking they were behind on strategy?
Ben, I think that this is a bit of a tricky question. I did sense throughout the race, especially at the start, that something was a little off. With Max Verstappen starting in sixth, it's not any challenge for him to come into that first place spot. But today it seemed like it was harder for him than it usually is in the past few races that we've seen. Now, this could be due to the fact that the other cars, like the McLarens and the Ferraris and the Mercedes, are finally catching up to Red Bull's pace, or it could be because Red Bull was trying to hide their full potential, which I don't know, maybe it would serve some sort of an advantage to them in the coming races, but considering that Max Verstappen's already the world champion for 2023, I don't see what kind of an advantage this would play for them. But I did sense throughout the race that there was something was off looking at Max Verstappen or the Red Bull, and as I mentioned, that could have been because the other teams are catching up or because Red Bull was trying to hide something.
And I guess if you're too busy stinging up the show for most of the season, got to make it interesting somehow to keep the fans tuned in until the very end, right? But in all seriousness, maybe this track, Circuit of America, is one of those tracks that doesn't best suit the Red Bull car. Or like you said, Isha, could just be that the other teams are finally catching up to Red Bull and pace a little too late for that. But yeah, it is a tricky question. I'm not really sure what Red Bull were doing today, whether they were only going like 80, 85%, 90% instead of 100%, or whether this track is just not 100% suitable to the car. But it was nice not to see a Red Bull runaway like we typically see.
Well, despite the other McLaren and Oscar Piastri going out, McLaren has gotten around Aston Martin for fourth place in the constructor standings, 239 to Aston Martin's 232. They're ahead by 7 at the moment. Part of that assisted by Fernando Alonso retiring from the race with rear suspension issues, so each team had one driver in the points. However, Aston Martin's driver, Lance Stroll, is also under investigation for starting on the grid, for getting to go in the pit lane for the race start initially if he loses 9th place, which I think would be a bit harsh. But regardless, that would be another 2 points gone, and McLaren would see their advantage jump up to 9. Kobe, how big of a mistake was this by Lance Stroll? Is this something that you would say is more of a situation where it can happen to anybody, or is it an unacceptable rookie mistake from somebody who is certainly no longer a rookie?
It really seems like that this is coming from a driver who's under a lot of pressure. It doesn't seem like he's 100% focused on the task at hand right now, especially with everything that's been going on with him. We don't even have to go into what happened during the Qatar Grand Prix race weekend with all of the troubles that he had throughout that entire race weekend, and then to make really odd mistake like this. I don't really understand how Lance Stroll or Aston Martin, let something like this happen. I'm still very puzzled how he was able to do something like this. But like you were saying, Ben, I think it would be a little harsh to disqualify him over something like this. It was just something that was just super unfortunate.
Yeah, I agree with Kobe here. I don't really think this was a rookie mistake, and I don't think it was unacceptable either. And I think that disqualifying him would be too harsh of a punishment for this. As Kobe mentioned, I think it's just the thing that happened today. I think it's just because he's got so much pressure on him, and I think that this is definitely going to add on to that pressure, and it's just going to further, ask the question of whether he deserves that seat or not. So I think that this was just because he was in so much pressure. And as Kobe said, I'm also surprised as to how this happened in the first place, or why, the team didn't like figure it out beforehand. But I don't know. I think that it's not really a mistake that deserves being disqualified completely.
And one more note on Lando Norris, there's a bit of a surprising stat that we have here. He has scored the second most points after the Austrian Grand Prix, second only to Max Verstappen. That is a huge testament to the work the McLaren have done, given where they were at the start of the year. Now, Norris is seventh in points at the moment, only 3 behind Leclerc. Again, of course, pending the results being made official with Leclerc being under investigation. So, Isha, here's a question for you. Do you see Norris getting a win at any of the remaining races in 2023?
I would love to say yes, especially when I look at the advances that they've done in the past few races, and the upgrades that they've brought to the car, the performances that they've put up together. But I just feel like the remaining races, it's too soon to see him winning. He's definitely going to be on the podium for the remaining races, but I don't think he's at that point yet where he'll be winning them because, as we saw today, even after all the fight that he put up, as well as all the other drivers too, Max Verstappen was still winning. So I think that we'll definitely see him take a win next season in 2024. I think the rest of this season, it's just too early.
Yeah, I think the only reason we'll see Lando Norris win in 2023 is because something happens to Max Verstappen's car and he's not at the front to win the race. But yeah, I think after I remember our last discussion about Lando Norris talking about feeling the pressure, Oscar Piastri having a really good run, and knowing Lando is supposed to be the team leader here and having a rookie come out and show him up at several Grand Prix this year, how frustrating that must be for him. I know Piastri retired from the race today, but Lando Norris, I think his performance today, has to feel good for him, and he can say, "I'm still that guy who can lead this team over Oscar Piastri." And looking into next season, like you were saying, Ish, I really do think that if McLaren can continue the positive momentum that they've generated across this season, especially during this last half of the season. I know I keep referring back to the beginning of the year when we were in Bahrain and Saudi Arabia, and this team was absolutely nowhere. And to basically go from the back of the grid all the way towards the front, I think it's been very impressive. And if McLaren can bring the 2024 car and hit the ground running where they are right now and continue to improve on that, I don't see why Lando Norris and McLaren and even Piastri can get some wins next year. But it remains to be seen how well Red Bull's car will be in 2024. Will it be the exact same as it is right now, dominant, or will they potentially take a step back?
I think, unfortunately, if it didn't happen today for Norris, probably going to have to wait until 2024, but we'll see what happens in the few remaining races we have this year. And I understand we have a couple of comments in the chat room. Adam Lemeries, well, he disagrees. He thinks, or no, he does agree, 24. Reading the comment too quickly there. Lando Norris will win in 2024. There we go. Thank you for that, Adam, as well as saying that was a sensational United States Grand Prix in Texas today. If Hamilton had 2 to 4 more laps, might have been able to get Max Verstappen for the win there. I also think if the Alfa Romeo maybe hadn't gotten in the way on the last lap, maybe could have made things a little bit closer there coming to the finish. But ultimately, it's another Max Verstappen win, just like we've had so many times before in this 2023 season. Now let's change gears and talk about the NASCAR Cup Series race at Homestead Miami Speedway. Isha, take it away.
Yes, Ben, looking at NASCAR now, in a race that saw multiple playoff drivers run into trouble, Joe Gibbs Racing's Christopher Bell clinched his spot in the championship four. He held off Ryan Blaney, Tyler Reddick, and William Byron to win the Forever 400 presented by Mobile One at the Homestead Miami Speedway. Now, at one point during the race, Bell was struggling with the car, wondering if he could stay on the lead lap. Then he clawed his way up to the front and took advantage of others experiencing misfortunes. Now, last week, after coming close to winning at Las Vegas, Bell thought that might have been his one shot to clinch a championship 4 berth, and now he's in a week later. So, Alex, starting with you, was today a big statement win for Bell? And do you think he's being slightly overlooked as a championship favorite?
This was a huge statement for Christopher Bell. I mean, last week was a big statement on its own, not getting the win, but today, like, he had to go back up there and earn this win because he was running 20th fairly late in this race. They had an issue at one point and just not really looking like a contender. But then here they are. They go and win this race after it looked like Ryan Blaney was going to win it. You had Kyle Larson, which we're going to talk about. It looked like he had the dominant car at a point. But Christopher Bell came through and makes last week not even matter, and he makes it into Phoenix with the win. Doesn't have to have an like he did last year at Martin. And man, something about Bell in late season. He's really able to just get these wins and get a win when it matters most. And I mean, that could be huge going into Phoenix. It'll be second time in Championship 4. I don't think he's the favorite by any means. I think right now it's Kyle Larson. But I mean, Bell just so impressive. And I'm very curious to see how they do in Phoenix for a second time, because last year it kind of just felt like, oh, I'm just kind of happy to be. But now that you're going in for your second time, I'm really curious to see how Christopher Bell in the 20 that.
Yeah, well, Alex, I hate to bring it up again because it's a tragedy. It's a very sad story, but you do have to remember last year of a situation going on at Joe Gibbs Racing going into that Homestead race. I think there was certainly a cloud hanging over that entire organization with obvious reasons, clearly with the death of Coy Gibbs. So it's perhaps understandable why Christopher Bell might not have been in a full 100% race mindset going into that race last year. We'll see if he can do anything different this year. But to answer the question, yes, I think he is being overlooked. I think he's been overlooked for quite a while now. I think this is somebody that we really need to start looking at as one of the, if not current stars of the sport, certainly future potential superstars of the NASCAR Cup Series. This is a driver that I think has, really come into his own very, very quickly here. It's easy to forget he's only been in the Cup Series for 4 seasons now almost. This will be the end of his 4th full-time year in the Cup Series. And he's turned into an established championship contender. And again, as much as people certainly know how I feel about this championship format and not being a particularly big fan of it, it rewards drivers like Christopher Bell who can go out and perform at the right place at the right time. And to Alex's point, that's at the end of the season. And this is his 2nd consecutive championship 4 appearance here. We'll see if he can close the deal this time. But absolutely, he is. And anyone that's overlooking him as a championship contender here is making a big mistake, and it could come back to bite them come time for Phoenix.
And when you look at the average finish for this year, Christopher Bell is second, but only behind William Byron. I know he doesn't have as many wins, obviously, but I mean, second in average finish, he has been here, so it's not like he just kind of came out of nowhere either. He did have to earn his way into this round with his playoff points and everything, but it just goes to show that Bell's been there all year, but he manages to get the wins at the right time.
Definitely, Alex. And now if we look towards a driver who won last week, we have Kyle Larson. He had one of the best cars at Homestead until he made a major mistake. His race-winning hopes went up in a cloud of dust, literally. Under green, he entered the pits behind Ryan Blaney and tried to make up ground on the number 12 by carrying more speed on entry. It all went wrong for Larson as he swerved to miss Blaney and damaged his car after crashing into the sand barriers at the pit entry. Now, this was Larson's 8th DNF of the year, and he finished 34th place. So, Ben, starting with you, Kyle Larson is a driver who's always driving on the edge. So were you surprised that he made this critical mistake, and has he let too many races slip away from him this year?
Oh, those were sand barriers? I could have sworn I heard Rick Allen say he went into the water as he was coming into the pit entry there. No, but in all seriousness, yes. I mean, this was a critical mistake by Kyle Larson. Fortunately, he has the win at Las Vegas to fall back on there. So, it's not too much of a concern for him as far as his championship goes. But I'll tell you what, Kyle Larson is, I think, one of the most talented drivers in not just NASCAR, but I think the entire world today. And I think he's going to prove it next year when he goes to Indianapolis. He proves it every time he gets on the dirt track. In all disciplines that he races, he is a true championship contender, race-winning contender. The one weakness I think he has is closing the deal in stuff like this. I think he very easily could have won the race today, but it's just a simple mistake. And I don't know if, he's just like so focused on looking ahead at what's potentially to come at Phoenix for him, winning a second championship. I mean, he's got the right mentality in terms of going for win or bust at this point because he's already locked in. You might as well just go try to, demoralize the rest of the field and go out and win by as much as you can here. But I don't think there was really any need for him to try to force the issue for something as simple as getting onto pit road at that stage of the race. It's a huge mistake for him, and unfortunately, to answer your question, it's not the first time we've seen him throw a race away like this.
Yeah, and for Kyle Larson, like you said, not the first time we've seen Kyle do this. I mean, just a few weeks ago at Texas, you could see that's a bit different, but that wasn't a mistake by Larson that he ended up crashing himself, basically. And this is just another thing with Larson where he kind of just overdrives sometimes, and like that's fine. That's why he is so good, because he is just able to drive on the edge like he does. But this situation was really bizarre. I was kind of shocked when I saw it happen on TV. It was, I didn't know. I didn't know what was going on at first. I thought it was going to go head on to the barrier first. I thought it was going to hit and run into Blaney. Huge moment of the race, and if Blaney makes a championship 4, it's going to be a lot because Larson decided to pivot over and hit the barrier instead of Blaney. So huge moment of this race. But I mean, Kyle Larson, probably drivers of all time and one of the greatest right now for sure. So like, mistakes happen, it's whatever, but I mean, this very bizarre incident for sure.
Definitely, Alex. And now we have some breaking news to share. So Chris Medland is reporting that Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc have both been disqualified from the Circuit of the Americas Grand Prix today. So Lando is now in second place, and Logan Sargent has finally scored his first points of the 2023 season. So Ben and Alex, what are your guys' reaction to this breaking news?
Well, I am thrilled for Logan Sargent. I'm sure this is not how he would have wanted to do it, but I mean, we got to put this into historical context here. This has not happened for 30 years, an American scoring points in Formula One. You got to go all the way back to Michael Andretti in 1993 when he finished on the podium at Monza. That's the last time, forget finishing on the podium, an American driver has even so much as scored. And for Logan to be able to say that in his home race, I'm sure this is going to be just a massive boost of confidence and shot in the arm that he needs in a year where he's, certainly in recent races also been, trailing off of Alex Albon a little bit and not being up to where he would like to be in terms of performance. We'll see if this can give him some momentum going into the final few races this year and what that might mean for keeping that seat in 2024. On the flip side of it, massive disappointment for Lewis Hamilton. I think it only finished off the podium at this track once in his entire career, and for Leclerc as well. I mean, I guess it comes back to that old saying, what can go wrong will go wrong for Ferrari. But this is certainly going to be a massive shakeup in the results, and I'm sure those calculations are being made right now. But we've gotten used to seeing this in NASCAR the last couple of weeks. Now we have it here in Formula One. I guess sometimes it's not even over after the checker flag waves because you do have to pass tech.
Yeah, and something I'm thinking of is the battle for second place in the championship. And Red Bull is very happy with this outcome because of how Lewis Hamilton's been closing in lately. But my big question is, how does this impact the battle for 7th? Who got it right now? It sounds like it's like finished 7th now, so that's something for everyone to keep an eye on as well, in case there's any other penalties for Stroll, which you guys talked about earlier for that incident. But yeah, big news out of F1.
Yeah, I personally feel like this is disappointing, obviously, when you're looking at Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton. But as Ben pointed out, for Logan Sargent, it's big news. For his rookie season, he does get points. Obviously not in the way that he wanted them, but they're points nevertheless. Now, continuing with NASCAR, so taking a look at the unofficial playoff standings, Larson and Bell are locked into the championship 4. Now, William Byron is 30 points above the cut line, and today's second-place finisher, Ryan Blaney, is 10 points above. Homestead has never been one of Blaney's best tracks, and he put together his best run at this track today. Now, Blaney has never made it past the round of 8, so Alex, do you consider Blaney's Homestead result a clutch performance after the disqualification scare last week? And do you think he's in a good position to make his first Championship 4 appearance?
I never imagined Ryan Blaney would be above the cut line this late. Like, we are in the last race of this round, and Ryan Blaney is above the cut line. Would not have predicted that at all. I thought he'd have a solid round, but I did not think he'd be above the cut line. So yeah, absolutely. This was a crazy good performance. He had the best car after Larson was out, it looks like. But then I think once the daytime to nighttime transition started to go away a little bit, but still coming home was second. I mean, Ryan Blaney, man, he is a threat for this race because if you go back to Phoenix last year, if he makes a championship 4, he is a legit threat for this championship. But can he get there? I would say he has a shot. He's been good at Martinsville before, but it's just he hasn't gotten that win quite yet. And for him, when you look at the point standings, he is plus 10. I think Byron is pretty good unless something catastrophic happens to him. But for Blaney, plus 10, I think if he can just get some stage points and hope that none of the 4 below this, he might be okay. Denny Hamlin and Martin Truex behind him in that point standings. So it's going to be not an easy battle for Ryan Blaney, but today, it would be not too surprising if he did make it. And honestly, he would be a strong threat. I don't know if people and Christopher Bell is underlooked. I think Ryan Blaney is being very underlooked right now because he's been very consistent all year. I know he doesn't have the wins just like Bell, and it's just a lot of bad luck as well. Just great performance that Blaney needed going into these last 2 years of the season.
Well, I want to look at where Blaney's finished in points throughout his career. His rookie year, he was 20th with the Wood Brothers and then came back his sophomore season and finished 9th and then moved to Team Penske, and it's been 10th, 7th, 9th, 7th, and 8th. So he's been very consistent, kind of a fringe round of 8 contender, if you will, somebody that you're not surprised if they get that far, but is always going to wind up being around 7th to 10th of the standings, kind of a middle-of-the-pack playoff contender. I think Blaney's shown with these clutch performances here these last couple of weeks, obviously getting the win at Talladega in the earlier round as well, that he's maybe taking that step forward. Maybe those comments from Kyle Petty were the motivation that he needed, talking about potential being unfulfilled. It looks like that potential is starting to be fulfilled this year. And again, I think we'll see if he can hang on. That margin that he has currently over the cut line is certainly something that can be gone as late as the second stage, or as early as the second stage in the race, I should say, if he can't get up there and maximize the stage points. But it certainly would not be a surprise to see him in the championship 4, and then with how he's run at Phoenix before as well, 6th in 2020, 4th in 21, and then 2nd last year, obviously with his teammate winning the championship. He would certainly be a contender if he can make that championship 4 at Phoenix in a couple of weeks.
Definitely. And now looking at a driver who, despite finishing 3rd, is the first driver below the cut line, we have Tyler Reddick. He is 10 points back. Next are 2 Joe Gibbs Racing drivers, Martin Truex Jr. and Denny Hamlin, who are both tied at 17 points below. Truex and Hamlin both ran into trouble around the same time, with something breaking in the steering that forced Hamlin into the wall, while Truex took his car to the garage after the engine expired. RFK Racing's Chris Buescher was nowhere to be seen all day long, trapped outside the top 20 for most of the race, and he finished 21st place. He is 43 points below the cut line. So Ben, starting with you, which driver has to feel the most disappointed after Homestead?
I think it's got to be Chris Buescher. I mean, this is somebody that we've been talking about kind of overachieving based on where RFK have been as an organization, certainly since before Brad Keselowski came on board. But even last year, I think, still kind of finding their footing and taking that step forward. Well, this year they've taken that step. Brad Keselowski has done everything but win a race. He's knocked on the door several times, and Chris Buescher has obviously won multiple races. But, excuse me, you see the point standings on the screen right there, 43 points. I guess is not mathematically a must-win, but for all intents and purposes, it's a must-win, for him going into Martinsville next week. So it's going to be very interesting to see how he can rebound from this. But I think he's certainly, I was going to say he's not going to be sleeping very well, but I guess, you might sleep better if you know that you only have one objective, and it's to win. You don't really need to be, breaking the calculator out and focusing on the mathematics there, because he really only has one path forward at this point, unless something crazy happens, I guess, where he goes out and wins both stages and then doesn't win the race, but the others ahead of him all, crash on the opening lap or something. It's really the only path forward he has, not winning a race, with the margin that he has to make up there. So I would say it's definitely him, in terms of who has to be the most disappointed of the playoff drivers, especially given how well Brad Keselowski was running for much of the day today as well.
Yeah, to follow up on that, Chris Buescher, where was he? That is just so bizarre. It happened at Vegas too. The only driver, once again, to get no playoff points at all. Just very weird, especially when Brad Keselowski was running top 5 for a lot of this race. And with RFK, the 17 with Chris Buescher was always the better car throughout at least 90% of the time. So it's just very bizarre. Past 2 weeks of 6 has been the better RFK car. But I would agree with Ben on that. But I'd also want to say Denny Hamlin's got to be super disappointed, because at one point it looked like he might have a shot at winning this race and race his way into Championship 4 and win it. But then he has apparently a mechanical issue. They don't exactly know what it was. On TV, to me, it looked like a right front went down, but they're saying that's not what it was. But yeah, very bizarre. Had a hard battle with with Ryan Blaney, and some got intense. Blaney calling him a hack, which I found very funny. But yeah, I feel like you gotta be very. And if you're Martin Truex, you're already disappointed. You're ready to quit and go on a boat. So I mean, it's between him for me.
Yeah, well, that's a good point as well. I think Joe Gibbs is probably very disappointed, even though one of his drivers won the race. The other two that are in the playoffs here in the postseason, you know, they had everything go wrong there in the closing laps. And it was the perfect 1-2 punch, you know, because it happened right back to back. Truex thought he was blowing up, and then, you know, ultimately did have to retire from the race under that same caution that was brought out by Denny Hamlin going into the wall. So not what you want to see as a car owner if you're Joe Gibbs. The silver lining, though, of course, is that, you know, at least one of your cars will be racing for a championship at Phoenix in 2 weeks' time.
Now that's all for our NASCAR section. Let's bring Kobe in for the shining moment. But first, Kobe, we'd like to hear your thoughts on Lewis and Charles being disqualified.
Well, to be honest with you, given the history of these circumstances of what they were disqualified for, well, at least what they were initially investigated for after the race, precedent shows, you know, that drivers like this typically get disqualified, and now we've seen it's officially been done. So I guess it's not that big of a surprise. And like we were saying during the F1 section, you know, obvious big disappointment for Hamilton, who really wanted to do well in front of the American crowd today. You know, because the big crowd at Circuit of the Americas, they thought they witnessed a Lewis Hamilton podium, and now that's ancient history by the time they've probably gotten home. And Charles Leclerc, as you guys were saying, what can go wrong has gone wrong for this Ferrari driver. Real unfortunate there, but for Logan Sargent, American-born driver, to get his first Formula One points, probably not how he wanted to do it with these pair of disqualifications, but hey, you get your points how you can. And for him to get the points for the first time for an American driver in 30 years since Michael Andretti in 1993, that's a really great thing for Logan. And like Ben was saying, I think it'll do really good for his confidence and his morale heading into this final stretch of the season. And now it's time for a Grid One shining moment. Joe, what's your one shining moment from this weekend?
My shining moment comes from MotoGP. First, they raced Saturday, so we recapped the race yesterday on the pre-race show. No sprint today, but Johan Zarco, he got his first win. Poor guy has not won since 2016 in Moto2. Over 100 starts in MotoGP. There was plenty of memes about him coming so close but having 0 wins. Now he got the wins. Those memes, they're retired. They're long gone. He has the confidence. I could win the Premier level. I could win against my teammate, Jorge Martin, who is championship caliber. Sort of wish he wasn't exactly going to LCR Honda next year. That's going to be, I think, a challenge. But he has to feel really good about what he accomplished in Australia. Getting his first win, holding off Pecco Bagnaia. Tight racing as always. Very close to pack racing in that track at Phillips Circuit. Zarco, my shining moment.
I have two, if you'll forgive me. The first one is, of course, the news that we just received. Logan Sargent, the first American to score points in Formula One in 30 years, like you were mentioning, Kobe. Michael Andretti, the last one to do so in 1993, and doing so at his home race as well. Again, probably not the way he would have liked to have done it, but hey, he still put himself up there in 12th position to be in position to get promoted should something like this happen. So it was still a very solid race based on the struggles that he's been going through the last several weeks and the questions surrounding his status for 2024. This is exactly the kind of result that he needed. And nonetheless, even if he had ended up remaining in 12th place, still a very solid effort from him today, and his teammate Alex Albon just ahead of him as well. But I also want to give a call to AJ Allmendinger. I think Homestead is certainly becoming one of his better intermediate tracks, at least on the Cup Series side of things. 5th place result today, I guess you could say a class win, the highest finishing non-playoff driver remaining in the championship fight. A great result for that colleague team. Again, I know there are some questions, speaking of 2024, and who's going to be in that car next year. Heavy talk that AJ's probably going to be headed back to Xfinity. We're not quite sure yet what the situation is going to be. We got more clarity on that with a colleague confirming that Chandler Smith won't be returning to the Xfinity 16 next year. So we'll see what happens on that front. But regardless of what Allmendinger is going to be doing next year in 24, this is exactly the kind of momentum that he's going to need going into the offseason as he gets ready for whatever his future plans hold. So those are my one shining moments from this weekend in motorsports.
For me, I'm giving it to Ryan Blaney. I know he didn't win the race, he got second, but this is the first time Ryan Blaney has truly felt like a championship contender. I know it's late in the season and we're getting down to it here, but Ryan Blaney has never been this competitive and this consistent and this like going into the late stages of the championship. And if he makes a championship 4, I mean, I know we're not supposed to be biased on here, but I am a Team Penske fan. I don't exactly hide it, as you can see, but like, that would be so exciting for Ryan Blaney to have a shot at this championship, because it's just, he's been trying for a very long time to be consistent and to try and just like not take himself out of a race. So he's my shining moment for sure, because this just felt like his big defining moment that we've been waiting for Ryan Blaney to have. And now can he build upon that and have more moments like that? We'll have to wait and see.
For my shining moment, I'm going to pull from Formula One and give it to McLaren's Lando Norris. This was his 100th race for his professional career, and I think he put up a great performance for it. You know, he finished third originally, and then after the disqualifications we just talked about, he came in second. So overall, I think it was a really, really good fight from him. And obviously, you know, congratulations to him for that, for 100 races so far.
And I'm going to give my shining moment once again to something that didn't actually happen on the racetrack this weekend, but I got to give my shining moment to Mason Massey, NASCAR Xfinity Series driver, who decided to open up ahead of National Stuttering Awareness Day. If you guys have been watching Great Network for the longest time, you might have known that I stutter as well. I've stuttered for my entire life since I was a child, and to see Mason Massey willing to use his platform to talk about stuttering and everything he's been through, especially something that hits very close to home to me, I thought it was really wonderful to see someone in his position also going through some of the same things I've been through my entire life. So I thought that was a one shining moment worthy topic.
Definitely a great one shining moment. Now tomorrow, Ben, you're going to be on the air with Brandon for Grid Encore. Then Wednesday, Kobe's going to be back on the air, and we encourage everyone, be sure to check out the interview Kobe as well as Alex had with Beth Coretta last week on Grid Tonight. Friday, we're all going to be back for the Women in Motorsports. We're going to do a full recap of the F1 Academy race weekend at Circuits in America. Then we do it all over again next weekend with Grid Live pre-race on Saturday. A big thank you to our Patreon subscribers for investing in the Grid Network. You can invest through Patreon. Do so. You'll get some Grid Network stickers mailed out to you as well. And of course, one of the big things, consider Buy Me a Coffee, YouTube Super Chat, or the YouTube thanks, especially our Grid Network team, all of us here looking for more opportunities in motorsports, bringing you more coverage, show your support for our members of the Grid Network team, and they'll thank you on the air. And we're looking forward to being back on the air tomorrow for the rest of the week, 2023 and 2024. For Isha, Kobe, Ben, and Alex, I'm Joe. Thank you for watching today's program. We'll see you next time, and we'll see you for Grid Encore tomorrow. Thank you for watching us right here on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe and check out some of our other videos, including Life on the Grid, where we interview folks from the motorsports industry. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.